Good afternoon. I'm Scott Booth. I'm the head of travel, tourism, and leisure for YouGov in MENA. I have with me Ali Hashmi, who is the industry manager of emerging travel for Google in the region. Terry Kane, who wears many hats, among which are head of travel for Facebook and Instagram in the region, and Dr. Sanjay Nadkarni, who's the director for research and innovation at Emirates Academy of Hospitality Management. Trying to go to the next slide. Who are we at YouGov? We're a global research company. We have over 500,000 panelists in the region who we conduct a continuous conversation with. Not quite as many touch points as Terry and Ali have, but we carry on a continuous conversation with our panelists. We're constantly gathering information, among which is quite a lot of travel information. So we run a large global study every year called the Travel Oracle, actually not global in MENA. 33,000 respondents this year, for whom we have over 80 pieces of information each. So this is behavior, demographics, spend, where they're going, who they're traveling with, where they're staying. We've added onto that a specific planning and booking technology survey this year. So we'll use these as the basis, nuggets of information that we can build our discussion on. What's the history of travel booking? So as travel became mass market, we consumers were dependent on an intermediary to book and plan the travel for us. We don't possess the channels, and historically before the internet, didn't have direct access to book ourselves. So we use travel agents. With technology, we're able to self-direct our travel now. We're able to personalize our trips a little bit more. It's quite an enriched experience. But Ali mentioned earlier on in a panel, in the planning and booking phase, when we control it ourselves, there are 460 experience points that we hit in that process. That's a lot of information. Some would say, I would say, probably too much. So we actually, when we look at the travel planning experience, we look at a 4-part process, including feedback. But in reality, as I said, these 3 components, researching, planning, and booking, are comprised of 460 different activities, different touch points, different things that we do. Personally, to plan a 2-week trip, I would spend 50 hours, about 3 hours per day. That's finding information, reading it, thinking about it, cross-checking it, et cetera, using all of your websites and then some. Is this actually where we want to be? Is this actually helping us as travelers? When we're looking at inspiration, it's important to remember as the conversation carries on, TV and social media are the top sources of inspiration. So we're talking about things like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. We're also looking at things such as, for instance, Game of Thrones causing people to go visit Croatia, Star Wars causing visitation of Ireland and Abu Dhabi. These are very powerful sources of highly enriched content that consumers latch onto and say, okay, great, I know what I'm going to see, or there's something specific that I want to go see. Different than text, different than 2-dimensional pictures on a website. Easier to make a decision on the basis. Nearly 2/3 of our respondents agree technology's made planning more spontaneous. So we'll talk about this as well a little bit later. But that means, as marketers, we have the opportunity to hit consumers with highly enriched content closer to the travel experience. This might mean a boutique hotel has more of an opportunity, given the right content, to reach new audiences. It might mean, for the likes of Google, Jumeirah, there's an opportunity to play the big guys with more enriched content, maybe virtual reality, a little bit closer to the travel experience. What's the upshot of all of this technological innovation right now, state as it stands? For a region that is historically very reliant on offline means for booking, what we actually see now is very limited reliance. on travel agents, offline travel agents specifically. So it's hugely online. Travel booking and planning is hugely online now. So, without further ado, I've spoken enough. Guys, what does the future look like? We've talked about where we are today. We've talked about where we've come from. What does the future of planning and booking in the world in MENA look like?
I'll get us started. Can everyone in the back hear me? Give me a thumbs up. Great, thank you very much. Hopefully less painful and more enjoyable. Okay. When we think about the amount of time that we as travelers spend, this was one study that Scott had alluded to that we had done with the number of moments that are in our travel decision cycle, but if we put it in terms of number of days, on average we know travelers take about 73 days to actually make a decision to travel from the time that they plan. So it is a long process. The traveler's road to decision is long, it's broken, and really the hope is that technology and other mediums have the ability to actually shorten this experience. I mean, for the better part of the last decade, Google has been doing a lot of innovation in some of the topics that we'll discuss today, right? Whether it is big data, which is, search is originally a big data problem. Right? How do you surface the right kind of content from all sorts of signals to people? Or virtual reality, or predictive analytics. So we'll get into that, I'm sure, in a bit of detail, but for us, we have to think about it from a user perspective. We have to reduce the pain points.
So it's about becoming easier, more consumable. Terry, same thing from Facebook?
Yeah, I mean, I guess reiterate what we discussed this morning, and the three C's of travel. The connectivity of people and where people are connecting. We're undoubtedly a mobile-first world today. The context of communications, no longer is this mass marketing world. People's eyeballs are on their mobile devices. More time is spent on digital than all other medias, and very soon more time will be spent on mobile than all other medias. So if eyeballs are there, are we talking to people in a personal way? Actually, one of the biggest complaints we get at Facebook is that if you know me so well, why is that advertisement not more relevant to me? And why is that communication not more relevant to me? So that relevancy in terms of context is absolutely essential. And then to reiterate Ali's point, I've been working in the travel industry all my life. It's always been fragmented. Distribution channels have always been fragmented. Measurement of distribution channels has always been fragmented. I don't necessarily see there being a one solution to the fragmentation issue, but where I think travel technology will focus on is bringing back the personalization of travel. So bringing back that touch of I'm an individual, treat me like an individual, and technology can scale this. That's a critical aspect. Technology can make this a reality.
Sanjay, from an academic
From
perspective?
an academic perspective, watching both Google and Facebook in action, if you look at the trend over the last few years, how travel has evolved, booking in particular, undoubtedly there has been this disruption caused by digital, and this is a non-linear kind of change. So it's very difficult to foresee what's coming next, because there could be something disruptive. When I say disruptive, I use it in a positive context, of course, which will remove this problem of aggregation and bring it to that individual level, just as Terry mentioned, so that a person feels as an individual rather than being clubbed as an aggregate. So I want this is as per my preference, and that's how it will happen. So this fragmentation can actually become an opportunity, and I guess digital is already at that stage where it's about to kick off.
Excellent. So, the topic is big data. We've talked about personalization, we've talked about simplicity, we've talked about making experiences more accessible, we've talked about fragmentation. One of the technologies that we want to talk about is virtual reality. So when we talk about making travel more accessible, making planning easier, I think we have two of the leaders in the field, thankfully. How do you see virtual reality, which is it's not a new technology, but the incarnation we have now, the quality of content, the quality of systems is very new. How do you see that transforming the travel planning and booking landscape?
Shall I go first in this one? Okay, cool. So I think that a bit of context around what virtual reality is to Facebook is important. So there's two types of conversation here. One is virtual reality, the other one is 360 videos. From a technology standpoint, they're completely separate technology suites. 360 video is about experiencing video on predominantly your mobile device and is, I guess, a real world scenario as possible. Turning with the device, seeing what's behind you, and you know, making it native, enhancing the video experience. If you think of 360 video in a linear cycle, you know, when we went to visit Italy in the past, we would have sent, you know, a postcard, and then it was text message, and then it was a picture, and then it was video. Now it's going to be 360 video and live video, and then coming from that, we're looking at virtual reality and artificial intelligence as well combined. Where we are today is very much at the beginning of that phase of 360 video, of accessing, enabling the platforms to make it possible. You can't buy a consumer easily a 360 camera today, but that will be coming very, very soon. So 360 videos will form a part of all of our lives. Live 360 videos will form part of all of our lives. But then virtual reality is a different story for Facebook. So virtual reality is about a complete deep experience. This is about entering a world effectively, and I always use the example, I'm a Star Trek fan. When Star Trek, you know, team used to go into the green room and it used to form this wherever they wanted to be, whether it be a mountain or whether it be under the ocean. That's what virtual reality is in our mindset. It's about bringing this technology, which is a completely deep sensory experience, to people to use in various different ways. And we purchased Oculus a couple of years ago, and we acquired Oculus as a company, and our focus on that has been about making this technology seamless. So it's about our first foray, I guess, into the hardware world, about creating this glass experience, about creating the platform for developers to build games, to build technology, to build productivity into. And our first release went out this month, where we shipped 300,000 versions of Oculus to the predominantly a gaming world. Let's be honest, they're first adopters of, you know, the latest technology. So their experience of gaming has become suddenly deeper, richer than ever before. And that's the start of it. We're at the very, very early stages of this. To use your example earlier, we're at the stages of the mobile phone. We used to carry the battery in a pack. This is where we are with virtual reality. This is just the start of a very long journey. Now, where that fits within the travel world and the hospitality world, we don't know yet. I mean, you walk outside today, you'll see lots of examples of Oculus sitting on people's stands. Some of them are good, some of them aren't good. But it's starting to be adopted from a travel experience standpoint, by bringing to life destinations, by bringing to life experiences. But ultimately, whenever we get to the stage of this being a product which is in everyone's homes, television, radio, virtual reality to a certain point as well, then we start to discover what the opportunities are from not just a business standpoint, but a social standpoint as well. How can we enhance society by bringing to life, for example, education? Why should only the elite students in the world have access to the elite universities in the world? Why can people throughout the world not be sitting in a classroom in, you know, Emirates Academy, or, you know, London Business School, or Harvard, or wherever it might be, as well as medical? Why can we not enhance medical opportunities through virtual reality? And, you know, from a travel experience as well, why can we not make travel more real to people before they actually make a purchase as well? We don't know the answer yet. It's early days.
Yeah. Ali, I think Google have developed a couple of executions, shall we say, recently, of 360 technology, which, to those of us who are extreme laymen, it feels pretty VR. Is it true VR? Is it holodeck from Sidetrack, or from Star Trek? No, it's not quite there. But it's a heck of a lot better than what we've had. Can you tell us about how that came about, and how you see it impacted?
Sure. I mean, look, To echo a couple of thoughts from Terry, we are at the very beginning of VR. Right? Most people don't even know, if you put it on them, what is it about VR that really moves them. Right? And I think part of it is that, when we talk about, there are a lot of buzzwords that get thrown around. Part of them is immersion. Right? We talk about immersive things, but if you truly think about it, a book is immersive. You can all sit in front of a paper, you've all had that experience sitting in a cafe, and everything zones out. Right? A book can be immersive. But I think between all of the previous media in which we could immerse ourselves with versus what we have in VR now, it's the difference between immersion and presence. And that's an important distinction to understand why it's so meaningful. The applications are numerous, right? And we'll kind of touch on them a little bit right now, but part of the challenge with VR has been that it hasn't gone, as of yet, beyond a geek project. It's something that has been limited and restricted, and at Google, at least the perspective has been to bring VR for everyone. For people to get a taste of what it means to have VR. So 2 years ago, you alluded, we launched the Google Cardboard. What at this time almost looked like a prank, right? Because it almost came out around April Fool's Day, and Google does these funky April Fool's Day stunts, and so people thought it was a stunt, but it wasn't. And a couple years later, over 5 million of these have been shipped. Right? 25 million apps have been downloaded. So people are beginning to experience it in a larger way. But on its own, that technology is not sufficient, right? Because you need to then connect that to a library of content that people can experience. And without doing that, so about a year ago, YouTube announced that you can actually experience all the video that we have in 360, almost as if it's your personal IMAX screen through Cardboard. But you can also now upload 360 special content. And about a week ago, we launched Livestream 360 with audio spatial content. What that means is that it gives you the beginnings almost of virtual reality, moving from 360 so that you can get the depth, the presence, the intensity that experience brings. So I think when we sit back and we take the perspective from Google, I think the view is that VR first needs to be experienced by everyone in a very democratic, cheap way. It costs you $20 to buy a virtual reality headset, quote unquote, the Google Cardboard. And then you have all the content that you love sitting on YouTube for you to experience at home, wherever you are. Once people have an entry point into this technology, I think that's when we're going to start seeing the true impact of virtual reality on any industry. I think travel, we've already had some interesting experimentations where we took the Google Cardboard and we launched the Expeditions program, where we put in these cardboards and put them into schools so that children could actually experience what it is like to stand on top of the Niagara Falls and actually visit places or go down into the ocean. The implications are deep. They will cut across virtually every industry, but the first step is that people actually need to have an entryway into this. And I think that's been the focus of a lot of our efforts. It's not where we will stop, right? Naturally, this will progress. I think Terry's absolutely right when he says that, look, the story is untold. But I think one thing's for sure, that its true potential will never come out until we actually make sure that people are actually experiencing it in large numbers.
So, Sanjay, I think Ali just touched on a very interesting point with respect to the children. We're looking at a very inspiring technology. This is something very different than what is already inspiring, opening a National Geographic and seeing lava coming down the side of a volcano into the ocean. That's quite a striking image, but to be there, to be immersed in it, to hear it, to see it, do you think we're opening up whole new worlds? Do you think that we're creating a level of content that really makes deciding to go off the beaten path, if you will, easier?
Yeah. What is happening now is, apart from just the visual, as you mentioned, Ali, there is also the audio, the depth, and probably the next thing that's coming is tactile. And I'm sure Google Labs is working on something as much as Oculus is. So what is happening here is, as a replacement or as an enunciation tool, this is certainly going to click, and this is going to be groundbreaking. And no sector will be left untouched. Terry mentioned about education, and of course we are seeing students, I mean the younger generation, they're digitally so savvy in terms of their adopting these type of technologies. They'll be far quicker. The effects will be much more pronounced. Even in our sector, we see this happening in hospitality. For instance, Marriott has taken on Oculus and experimenting with it. Jumeirah has tied up with Google to come up with the 360 immersive videos. So you're beginning to see these buds across all sectors. And as the technology gets more democratized, to use the term that Ali used, there will be more and more innovative usages that will come out of it in this space. Some of them could be disruptive from the positive sense. Some of them, for instance, my job could be threatened as a professor. Jokes apart, yeah.
You touch on disruption, and I think it's a very important point with virtual reality. So, won't name any names, but one of the conversations that we had early on was, is there actually a potential, and I call it the holodeck holiday as a kind of a Star Trek fan, is there actually the potential that you could go on a staycation in your living room but be halfway across the world in your mind through virtual reality? Is that possible?
I mean, first and foremost, I don't think anything beats the personal feeling of sitting on a beach away from anything else in the world with a book, and a drink. I don't think any technology that we know today can replace that feeling. And travel's about experience. It's about the destination. It's about the pampering. It's about the deeper experience, what you're seeking. And it's very difficult to speculate in terms of where that technology is going to go in the future. But what I would say today, and I'm privileged position to get first testing of the latest developments, particularly in Oculus. I was in our New York office recently in the past couple of months to try the latest development, where I was literally walking down the street in New York with the Oculus headset, with the motion sensors, and it was a game, and a robot came from my left, and I've tried Oculus hundreds of times. I literally ducked for the first time. I literally moved out of the way because the sensation was so much, so intense. It was there. It was felt like it was there. But in terms of what that means to your question directly in terms of travel, and I really don't see that it impacting negatively upon travel destinations, travel providers. If anything, it's going to enhance the experience if the content is done right. And remember, it's just hardware without good content. That's why we've built the platform to enable developers to build specific content for the devices, not 360 video, but virtual content.
Thank you. It definitely is about prolonging that experience. Right? So for the people who are going to travel, I agree, nothing's going to take away your run to Morocco, and you're never going to be able to experience that in any other way except by being there. But the reality is that for most of us, once we make a travel decision and once we've bought in, we are going onto different platforms and looking at content, getting ourselves psyched about that visit that's coming up. And if this is a way that can extend that experience, right, it's very, very powerful for brands. It's very powerful for destinations. And even earlier in the cycle, it's very powerful for people to try to get you to try a destination before you actually go there. Will it replace the sensation of being there? No. But let's not forget, we're privileged, most of us in this room, to be able to travel. There's some people who will never get that opportunity to travel. So for those people, it may indeed be an experience that they could not have by actually physically traveling. They'll just get to go to a place, maybe their vacation or maybe their holiday is experiencing different parts of the world. But for the rest of us who actually do travel, I think it's more of an enabler and an extender than it is a substitute.
To that point, my previous previous role with Jumeirah Group, and anyone from Jumeirah here, I'm selling this idea to you. But having stayed in Burj Al Arab a few times, that's an amazing experience. If I was to check out of Burj Al Arab with a program on virtual reality, that any rainy day sitting in Ireland or wherever it might be in the world, that I can plug in Burj Al Arab again, I can be there in the room in the suite. That would be a pretty cool extender of an experience.
It's to plug on that, I think version 2, phase 2 is coming about, where you will be able to do that experience, right? So as part of Jumeirah Inside, when we filmed the Virtual Arab, it was indeed about giving this access, and now they actually tested this for those of you who were at the links. The experience was actually experienced for the first time, and it is that moment that when people go in there, this is the most common experience of someone who's been to one of these devices the first time. It's that, because there is a joy and an experience that you get, and add to this the dimensions of spatial audio, the ability to turn this way and listen to the bar and the crinkle of the glasses. It immerses you in a way that is phenomenal. So for sure, this is a space that's only going to grow.
Just make sure it was on Oculus this time.
Terry, one of the things that happened recently with the delivery of Oculus, Mark Zuckerberg, the man, has come out quite publicly and said that he sees virtual reality as core to social in the future. Ali, you were mentioning you can go and experience the bar. Right now that's limited to you. So you can be at the bar, obviously you're just looking and listening. Is there a future, a very near future, where you can interact with the patrons? There's a potential there for business travel. We were discussing holding a global board meeting without having to go anywhere. Right now that might be accomplished through Skype or GoToMeetings, other such technologies, sorry for the plugs. Is there a future where I don't have to leave to go to a global meeting? I can have Thanksgiving dinner, maybe no dinner, but at least the conversation, without having to go home.
I can see all the
How
business travel.
How far away are we?
No, that's not going to happen.
I know.
Yeah. Do you know what? I think that if anyone that watched Mark's release of this, you would have seen the example of the table tennis or building blocks. And then that's the first phase of this, that literally you can now go into virtual reality and play real-time table tennis or any kind of interactive sport that we've developed with anyone in the world at any other time, as long as they've got the Oculus set. So this is the first time, I guess, in a gaming sense, that you can play competitively in real time with a real person anywhere in the world. And that technology has to develop. This is the first foray, really deep foray into hardware creation, hardware perfection, platform development for developers to do this. The development community is critical to this. The startup community in virtual reality is critical to this, that they develop the games. When Apple released the iTunes Store developing apps at the very, very beginning, that's the stage that we're at this moment in time in terms of virtual reality on the Oculus App Store, and how you then interact with how that development community develops the utilities and experiences, etc., will inevitably enhance over the coming years. So yes, you can be sitting at Thanksgiving with your family, but it's better to be there.
It is, but let's see. The future is now, right? We've talked a lot about, we've beaten virtual reality to death a little bit. Virtual reality has been really enabled by the rise of computing power and is the reason it sits in the big data discussion today. There's another technology that's quickly coming. It's not quite a reality, but Ali, Terry, I think you both have some offerings in this area. The rise of predictive or somewhat predictive itinerary planners has become quite a phenomenon. So when we talk about the socialization of travel in being able to reach more people with more simplistic planning cycle, better content, etc., these services that allow you to input your preferences and then give you suggestions on what you should do, or perhaps someday in the future tell you what you should do, may actually revolutionize travel. Sanjay, have we seen any real change in the market because of these technologies yet.
So as machine learning algorithms get more and more sophisticated, this is bound to happen. A good case in point is Google Now, if we start off with that as a conversation point. About a year ago, I was surprised when I got a notification on Google Now, it's time to leave for the airport. I freaked. How did Google Now know? Because I had not put anything on my Google calendar. It turned out that there was an e-ticket emailed to my Gmail account, which Google Now had picked up and alerted me it's time to leave for the airport. So now from being freaked out, I've actually come to rely on Google Now. So that's been, from an adoption perspective, that's how I have evolved. And as we see this going ahead, as algorithms get more and more wiser, if I may put it that way, for lack of any better term, it will be to the benefit of the consumer. So I can rely on the algorithm to make decisions for me. I entrust it. So we're reaching that stage now. It's no more fiction anymore. And from a privacy perspective, well, it's a give and take, isn't it? You give information, you get better insights in return. So why should I worry about privacy? Why should I freak about privacy? So when Facebook and Google ask me whatever terms and conditions, I don't even, okay, take whatever, I'm open. Know whatever you want to know about me. I have no secrets, give me the right recommendations, I'm happy with you. That's me.
Ali, you mentioned Google Now. I'm a new convert to Google Now. I understand the creepiness, but the technology has gotten to such a point where the enablement of the betterment of your own sort of day-to-day scheduling and life is worth it, to me, anyways. Do you see high adoption of such technologies? You mentioned destinations earlier, so two questions in one. You mentioned destinations in the earlier panel. How do you see adoption of destinations, and how do you see that evolving in the next year, the next 18 months?
Sure. Take a step back for a second, right? When you talk about technology, and when you talk about the power of technology and machine learning and the application of machine learning to large amounts of data for some of the big players, certainly the two of us on stage here, but also other players, other large players, the potential is definitely there. The tension is always with that privacy angle. And I think Sanjay is probably more generous. I think it depends where you are from, right? So we see that in the United States, that quid pro quo of what I get and what I give is a lot clearer, and predictive technologies are generally not finding a whole lot of opposition. You look at places such as Europe, there is a bit of tension, right? But I think one thing's for sure is that being respectful in the way that we ask those permissions, and in the way that we seek those permissions, and having it on a model that we generally tend to believe in, and somewhere you did opt in, Sanjay. You might not have known it, but you did opt in, versus a generally you are opted in if even, so it's opt out, right? So you're opted in unless you tell me specifically that you're opted out. That's probably not generally the way to go. But the point is that it is about utility. It is about that give and take. There is something about utility there. Now, Google Now has been something that I think quite a few people in this room, by a show of hands, I really am curious, how many people have benefited or used or gotten a Google Now notification? How many people would like that to stop? So it's really interesting that there are, just in the small sample set of rooms, right, quite a few people, roughly probably a third of you raise your hand, and then most people do not want it to stop. It's because it's delivering a utility. And it's something that I think, you know, once you open up that machine learning to other areas, in the morning panel I mentioned
Google destinations, at least in theory. I don't understand the underlying technology, but at least in theory, things like Airbnb ratings, the information is there. It's theoretically accessible to the engine. Do we see AI incorporating more boutique operators? Is it an opportunity for them the same way that virtual reality is? Or are they sort of, so sorry, you're not involved, you don't have the infrastructure?
Anything from a hotel to be very specific around destinations, it's integrated very well with the hotel ads. experience. So to the extent that you are able to get onto hotel ads, which you can through an integration partner, whether you're large or whether you're small, your inventory gets displayed. So you're not locked out. Airbnb is a slightly different model because it resides, to my understanding, even though I have my hotel ads lead for the region here, but I don't think Airbnb is integrated into hotel ads. But boutique hotel operators that wish to can get on hotel ads just like anyone else, so they're not locked out. They have the same opportunity to reach the same set of people. As long as someone, if they're asking for a 5-star, as long as you are a 5-star in the geography, you have a fair chance.
Just from to this point as well, I mean, again, just to reiterate the point that on Facebook, the complaint that we would hear is, if you know me so well, why is that not more relevant to me? As a platform, we obviously want to keep people engaged on a platform. We want to make content relevant to them. 1.6 billion people on Facebook every month. Every single one of those 1.6 billion people are different. Their interests are different. What they want to see is different. So therefore, their Facebook experience and Instagram and Messenger, like WhatsApp, etc., experiences are very, very different to them. Now, for businesses to talk to people in their own personal space, which the mobile device is, it's very personal to me. You got to make the effort to make the context of your conversation relevant to them. So as platforms, you reward people who have content that is relevant, that is getting engaged with, that people are appreciating, and on the opposite side of that, those pieces of content which are highly negatively engaged with, you should be punishing through higher costs of business, of display. So the two sides of that, to encourage businesses to be more relevant to the people that they're trying to speak to appreciate that the mobile device and the content that people want to see on the mobile device is relevant to them. The example that I gave earlier was, 1.6 billion people on Facebook doesn't mean much to anyone in the travel world. To information, they have more access to job information, about personal information, about hospital, etc. So it makes people's lives better. So we've only literally got 1% of this journey finished. This is a long-term game for us, and we're only getting our teeth into it. We're only 12 years old as a company as well, so we're pretty young.
Infancy.
Yes, yeah.
Adolescence, I would say. Sanjay, from an academic perspective, is there a model for adoption? I mean, we've heard we can build it if people want it. Is there a model for adoption?
So the model for adoption, there's no specific model per se, but if you look at it from the perspective of how this has evolved, the psychographics have evolved into webographics, so to speak, and from that point onwards, now we are looking at a fuzzy segmentation, which brings us to profiles, individual profiles. So it will be difficult to box people, silo people into certain categories. It will be a very sort of a fuzzy kind of evolving scenario, and it's already happening. But on a slightly different note, I mean, touching on what Terry said about being in control, and Ali pointing out the technology is already there. No matter whether I'm told by any personal digital assistant, this is what you have to do, at the end of the day, the decision is mine. I cannot acknowledge, even if that may be true, that Google now or any equivalent is smarter than I am. So that'll always be the final kind of the high-tech, high-touch kind of a balance. So that's where we head.
Great. I think we're about out of time. Judging from the show of hands earlier, I think we can expect about a third of us in the room to be using some kind of predictive technology in the next couple of years. Maybe. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Ali. Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Sanjay. It's been a nice discussion about data.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.